Hi, my name is Juan, and welcome to The Couch, a podcast where real therapists talk about real things. Please remember that we are therapists, but we are not your therapists, and this podcast is intended for educational purposes only. All right, my friends, how is everyone doing today? Our topic, our topic really, I think, started when I ran into this survey, I believe it was from Harvard. They had a health blog on there, and it was a national survey, and it found, looking at mental health, the percentage, I believe, was around 27% of parents said their mental health going downhill, right, declining, being impacted. 17% said their kids, right, their kids' behavioral health declined. And those, I think any percentage there is concerning. So then I thought to myself, all right, what's happening? What's happening within the household when kids get home and the door closes? What takes place? What's going on? What's going on in the home with the family, with the couple? And I think it's important for us to, have this conversation. If you're a parent, take a moment, spend that with me here. Let's look at patterns within a family system that are causing stress. And my goal is that we look at these patterns, we talk about them so that you have an idea of the shift. What can I do differently as a parent? I'm a parent too. I've got 2 kids. And I think it's important for us every so often to pause our journey of parenthood and evaluate. We do it in many other spaces, right? You pause every so often when your car gets empty and you put some gas in it. You pause when it's time for an oil change, right? You pause when you look at your pantry, you need more food, you go shopping. Clothing update, pause, get new clothes. Parenting can work the same way. Let's start with something called triangulation. You can think about triangulation within a family as when you pull someone in. So that's when there's tension. Let's say there's tension between mom and dad, right? Something happened between them two. And then a child is dragged in. And the parent is dragging in one of those childs to try to stabilize the situation. And what ends up happening is, it's A, not the healthiest practice. B, it creates this relief for like just temporary tension, just for that current moment. That would be if you're with your spouse and maybe they forgot to do something, and then you're yelling at them and you grab a child and you say, you do the same thing to our child. You forget their stuff too. And the kid goes, yeah, sometimes you forget my stuff. Right? So then it kind of just stops. Well, a lot of damage is happening there, right? A, that conversation between the parent, right? That should be separated from the child. So the shift that I want you to look for is direct communication, right? Instead of having a middle person, right? That child, instead of dragging them in to stabilize the situation, right? Have that conversation directly with your spouse, not through somebody else. The next one I want you to look at, and this is one that I do see a lot even within the counseling setting, is the all or nothing thinking, right? Perfectionism. And that could be, if I'm not doing this perfectly, then I failed. I'm not good enough. And I want you to put yourself in your child's shoes. Think about your child. Do they hold that feeling of perfectionism? Right? And perfectionism does not solely just mean that they're always trying to be perfect, right? It could be that the child feels, hey, I need to have certain grades or my parents are going to get mad. They won't like me. They'll be upset. I need to start on my sports team or they're going to be upset. And what happens, which I think it's important to know, what is the aftermath of all or nothing thinking of perfectionism? Well, I want you to imagine that. Imagine that you feel that you always have to reach that perfect state. And when you don't reach it, what sits with you on that lonely bench? Likely shame, guilt, stress, burnout. Lean away from it. The shift I want you to look at is good enough. And maybe you just push that off. Well, can't live a life that's just good enough. Well, add more to it. Good enough can include SMART goals. And if you're not familiar with a SMART goal, just as a little note here, each letter stands for a specific item. So SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. It's a lot of research on this. Take some time to look at it. An example of this would be if my son, if I've been parenting him where he feels that he needs to come home with only A's, right? Like that is the expectation. If you don't have all A's, then you failed, right? I want to shift that over to, hey, tell me what type of student are you? My son says, well, I think I'm an AB student. Okay. And then I want to go a little bit further. Tell me about how are you studying? Right. So I want to look at, is the practices that he's engaging in good enough? Maybe I want to set a SMART goal. And that could be an example here. It could be that the goal is specific, such as, we want to be able to get a B or higher. Measurable. How are we going to measure this? How are we going to attain it? Maybe I toss in there some tutoring. And if you kind of comprehend what I'm getting at, is I'm building this good enough system that's healthy around the goal that we've set, rather than the child or the parent having to feel that they have to reach this perfect state. And if they do not reach it, then they failed. Then they're not good enough. And then within that, here's something that's really important, is the why. Well, why is having a life connected to good enough? Why is that okay? Well, what feelings come from it? Right? If someone's worked really hard and they've studied and they've shown up and they've done tutoring and they've done their best, and then they take a test and what comes out is a B, and then they say, you know what? I am proud of my hard work. And then you ask them, is there anything else you could have done? And they're like, well, let me rethink it. I've done the tutoring. Excuse me. I've done tutoring. I've stayed after class. And they list out all these things they've done. And then you go, okay, how do you feel? I feel good. There we go. Now, when you compare that feeling of good, I feel okay, I feel strong, whole, valued, seen. How does that compare to, if I'm not doing it perfectly, I failed, I feel guilt, I feel burnout, I feel stressed, I feel not good enough, I feel stupid. The next one I want you to think about is, and again, we are looking at the unnecessary stress within a family system and how to shift away from it. The next one here I want you to look at is what's called emotional cutoff. So that takes place when in a household there is the avoidance of hard conversations, of conflict, disagreement. And why? Well, why? Because we're trying to keep the peace. We're trying to keep the peace. And is that really what's happening? I think if we're honest with ourselves, no. What's happening is when we avoid conflict, when we, quote unquote, do it for the sake of peace, well, let's work backwards. What led to this conflict, to this emotional disruption that's taken place? Likely what's led to it is an interaction between two people, maybe parents, maybe parent-child. And within that interaction, there's feelings, right? Frustration, emotions, there's disconnect, there's thoughts, behaviors, avoidance. And all of that's building and it's accruing. And if the statement is, well, let's avoid it for the sake of peace. Well, now what we have is, right, we have this pattern that we're building within our family. And it's creating this unnecessary challenge, this unnecessary stress. So we want to lean away from that and lean into repair. Hey, look, I'm sorry. I've messed up. My bad. Right? maybe better than my bad. Scratch that. Now, I'm sorry I've messed up. The reason, right? Why do we want to engage in dialogue? Well, to bring out those things that are being avoided for the sake of peace. And this is not to say that you scream at each other and say every single thing in the book, right? Do it in doses, small doses, a little bit at a time. So that could be that if you and your child had an interaction that's really, really tough, instead of spending a whole hour with them, putting on your professor coat and lecturing, slow down. Lean into more of an emotional dialogue. Sit down for 10 minutes and say, hey, let's talk a little bit about what happened. How did you feel about it? Hear them out. Here's how I felt about it. Share. While doing it, practice healthy skills. Practice compassion, empathy, respect, accountability. It'll go a long way. So in this episode, right, short and sweet, it aims to help you pause for a moment as a parent to look at the patterns within your life, within your relationship with your spouse, with your children, to highlight the ones that are alive yet creating disruption and disconnect. Highlight them and say, no more. I'm ready to make a change. Shift away from them, step away from them. And we talked about the ones that you could shift into. And if it feels like the mountain's a little too high to climb, maybe you're a bit nervous of getting lost in the trail, and all of that's a metaphor to represent the process of shifting away. Reach out to a support person. It could be a counselor here over at Santos Counseling, or maybe someone near your neck of the woods, if you will. You don't have to do it alone. Heck, that's often a lesson that we teach our kids when they need help. Hey, you don't have to do it alone. There's a tutor. Go ask your coach. Perhaps we can listen to the echo of our own voice.